Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. And we had a dire warning from former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss about Mark Carney. Just released report today from GB News that net zero policies are tanking the economies of European countries. When we come back, more about the coming inferno if Mark Carney is elected. We need political change, but we also need to resolve to resist. Do you feel like now there's a sense of foreboding in the world? Do you have the feeling, the sensation, that the walls are closing in? That we are being set up for a globalist installment of a prime minister who should never have gotten the job in the first place? And if he's elected, it's only going to be because the Canadian establishment has pushed him as far as he's gotten. Now, I like to say this is like a coup d'etat. Now, it's true a coup d'etat is when an official or a government is installed through violence and not through the ballot box. But Mark Carney is being installed through the ballot box, perhaps, but through rigged elections, and that's what we saw in the Liberal leadership. And you know, it just occurred to me. We had electronic voting in Ontario. Are we going to have that federally? Because that process is fraught with difficulties. That could be how Mark Carney gets this. He's being pushed by the national media. He's being pushed by the establishment. He's being promoted by far too many people, including Doug Ford, and we'll get to that later. But there's breaking news out of Britain right now. And this is fascinating. I got to put my glasses on for this one. Net zero could crash Britain's economy with poorest in society hit hardest, leaked document admits. This is absolutely stunning. This document claims the transition to net zero by 2050 comes with the potential risk of destabilizing the financial system. That's Mark Carney's legacy. He started this net zero idiocy. The assessment seen by The Sun also suggests the poorest in society can bear the heaviest burden of these economic changes. The document was prepared by the Business and Trade Department in November 2023. So the British government prepared it for, and they're ignoring it. The report warns that hundreds of billions of pounds worth of assets worldwide may need to be retired up to 30 years before the end of their useful life. This could cause market meltdown due to sudden drops in company values, affecting both British firms and overseas investors. Now, listen to this. This is some comment on it.
Net zero could crash the economy. The poorest will be hit hardest. It could wipe GDP off, send debt soaring. The sort of thing you've been saying for years, and yet here we have it now in black and white. Civil service admitting it. Can I get your reaction to that?
Yeah, I'm glad they finally come around to common sense. You know, net zero is a suicidal policy. It's a project of national suicide to sacrifice industry, infrastructure, economic growth, and pretty much everything else at the altar of this religious hysteria, this idea that we have to appease the gods of climate and sacrifice as much as possible so they don't get angry with us. There's something very medieval about this ideology, and I think it's very clear that it's going to hurt the poorest people in society and working class people by getting rid of loads of good jobs, getting rid of whatever manufacturing we have left, making it less likely that we'll open coal-fired stations or dig for oil or have nuclear power. This is all disastrous, and I think we need to prioritise growth rather than shrinking carbon emissions.
How would you prioritise growth, though? It doesn't seem the government being able to pull any lever yet. They're finally now realising, and I think hopefully realising, that getting out of the way might be a good start. Do you think they'll be doing it in time? You've got Keir Starmer there giving speeches about abolishing quangos and regulators and red tape and unshackling enterprise. You buying it?
Isn't it interesting that Keir Starmer is now saying the kinds of things that you guys at The Sun have been saying for years and years?
Exactly.
Which you guys got a lot of flack for saying, not least from the Labour Party. You know, that we need to cut red tape and we need to cut green tape and we need to strip out all these quangocracies and do something about the blob in Whitehall and so on, although he's not going far enough down that road for my life. He's finally realising, I think once you get into power in this country, you do finally twig that actually there's a lot of kind of quicksand style government infrastructure that just prevents you from moving forward, prevents you from doing what you want to do. And even Labour's fairly limited agenda is difficult to realise when you've got all this stuff up against you. So I think he's finally realising that. I think it's too late. And also, I just don't trust that the Labour Party, which is the party of the public sector and the bloated state
and the unions.
And the unions and the party that doesn't trust ordinary people. I don't think that's the party that's going to cut the state in the way that we need a government.
Probably not. But here's Liz Truss. And this is incredible. And this is what she recently told Glenn Beck. She recently told me something very similar, but former UK PM Liz Truss slams Canadian PM Mark Carney. He did a terrible job of the governorship of the Bank of England. He created a lot of the problems that blew up on my watch. It is illegitimate that this guy has never been elected as a member of parliament in Canada. Illegitimate. It certainly is. Now let's listen to Liz Truss elaborate on this in my interview with her.
The main culprits in the failure to revive the British economy is the Bank of England and the terrible monetary policies they pursued, printing too much money, enabling too much government spending. Mark Carney in particular was fixated on net zero and one of the key proponents of Britain hosting COP26, one of the key proponents of us committing to even more unrealistic and disastrous net zero targets. And if you look at Britain's economy now, we haven't had any serious economic growth for quite some time. We've had too much immigration, so GDP per capita is actually lower than it was. And we've got the highest energy prices in the world, thanks to those net zero policies. But not only did Mark Carney advocate those policies as governor of the Bank of England, at the last election, he backed Rachel Reeves, the now Labour Chancellor, who has made the situation even worse through tax rises, through more net zero policies, through more government regulation. And Britain is teetering on the brink now of a financial crisis. So it may have looked smooth at the time, what the Bank of England did, but it was a on net zero and one of the key components. What happened with inflation in Britain, and we've had
leadership of the Liberal Party to replace
the policy that he would want to pursue if selected to be Prime Minister of Canada.
So you wouldn't recommend Mark Carney for Canadians because, as you know, he's running right now for the leadership of the Liberal Party to replace Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He's the front runner, and of the cabinet.
What I would suggest to people is they look at the record of the Bank of England. They look at what happened with inflation in Britain, and we've had a huge inflation crisis. They look at what's happened to productivity in Britain, and they also look at Britain's net zero policies, which Mark Carney was a major advocate of, and they see how those policies have worked out. And they're not working out well for the British people. the level of satisfaction with the British government is incredibly low. The Chancellor, who Mark Carney backed, is incredibly unpopular. So, and what we're seeing around the world, and the biggest example was in the United States when Donald Trump was elected, is an utter rejection of this whole worldview. The worldview of fossil fuels are bad, we need net zero, we should be importing solar panels from China, the worldview of national institutions aren't important, we've got to outsource all these decisions to international bodies like the UN and the IMF and the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization. Voters are rejecting this. They are angry in Britain. They've rejected this in America, electing Donald Trump. And I would be extremely surprised if the Canadian people want this agenda. So it's surprising to me that Mark Carney is even in the running for this job.
Me too. And this is where we are. There's craziness out there. We have statues of Wayne Gretzky being covered with excrement. We have people vandalizing Tesla cars. We have Europeans issuing travel advisories to the United States. What should have happened was when Donald Trump was elected in November, Pierre Poilievre should have congratulated him and said, conservatism is moving forward. That's what should have happened, and it should be moving forward. What's happening, though? We've got the justice system going after Donald Trump now so he can't deport illegal aliens, criminal illegal aliens. There's so many crazy things happening. And Canada is possibly, I'm not saying this is inevitable, because it's not. I say resolve to resist every day because we have to get out there and fight. Get out there and vote. We haven't even had the election call, but we know it's coming tomorrow. But what do we need to do is to ensure that Mark Carney never becomes prime minister or is elected for 4 years as prime minister. He's already prime minister, and listen to his lines right now. Listen to the way he's talking. I'm so moderate, but he's talking in a two-faced way like politicians do so well. Let's listen to Danielle Smith here.
And I do just want to comment on an event that happened yesterday.
Premier Danielle Smith believes the feds need to get their messaging straight on Alberta's biggest industry. She says Prime Minister Mark Carney told her in a one-on-one meeting Thursday he doesn't support an oil and gas emissions cap. At a press conference that afternoon, he told reporters he does support a mechanism to cut emissions.
C'est une question de résultat.
Speaking in French, Carney said it's results that matter to Canadians, not laws.
The Prime Minister's words sounded kind of nice yesterday until I looked at my phone right after the meeting with him and found out that his new Environment Minister had just told media on the other side of the country that the federal Liberals would be keeping the emissions cap in place.
The apparent contradiction adds weight to the Premier's threat of an unprecedented national unity crisis if the next federal government doesn't address her demands.
We'll do a broad, fair deal panel review. We'll go and talk to Albertans and see what they would like us to do in response.
The Premier had another chance today to put her concerns to Carney, attending a First Minister's meeting in Ottawa by video call. Jeremy Thompson, CTV News, Edmonton.
Now, of course, Danielle Smith, I think, is being very reasonable, and Pierre Poilievre has said so. She wants guaranteeing Alberta full access to oil and gas corridors, so the norm to the north, east, and west. Repealing Bill C-69. This is the pipeline bill. Lifting the tanker ban off the BC coast. Eliminating oil and gas emissions cap. Now, Carney said he's not going to lift these when they had the news conference with the environment minister, screening the so-called clean electricity regulations, scrapping the so-called clean electricity regulations, ending the prohibition on single-use plastics, abandoning the net zero car mandate. And then there's more. This is reasonable. And she's also made it clear that Alberta is in charge of its natural resources and will not accept an export tax or restriction of Alberta's oil and gas to the United States. Now that is completely reasonable, but Mark Carney is playing this from both sides of the street, as he is very apt to do. And I think I've just got to get another video in here. Excuse me for a second.
Well, April 2nd, I would have made it April 1st, but I didn't want to be April Fool's Day because then nobody would believe what I said, and they do believe me. April 2nd is going to be Liberation Day for America. We've been ripped off by every country in the world, friend and foe. We've been ripped off on trade. We've been ripped off on military. We protect people, and they don't do anything for us.
Now, I'm only playing this because this is part of the insanity in the environment right now, in the political environment. Why has he got this hate on for Canadians and for Canada? Why is he supporting Mark Carney? Why does he think Pierre Poilievre is not my friend? What is his end game plan? Well, maybe it is the 51st state. But he knows that's not going to happen, except by use of force. But Mark Carney becoming or winning this, he is prime minister. He is prime, but if he wins the mandate from the Canadian people and he gets that 5-year term, that could be the end of Canada. Because we just heard Danielle Smith talk about a national unity crisis. Alberta's not going to put up with another 4 or 5 years of net zero, crazy environmental policies. And why are we doing this? It achieves absolutely nothing unless you really believe that climate change is such an existential threat the world is going to end in 20 years or 10 years or 5 years. The people who push this do it with a religious ferocity. It is their religion. It's not rational anymore, if it ever was. It's irrational behavior. It's irrational talk. Let's listen to a bit more Trump here.
Friend and foe. We've been ripped off on trade. We've been ripped off on military. We protect people, and they don't do anything for us. It's just so unfair for years and years. And now some of that money is going to be coming back to us in the form of tariffs. People are coming to me and talking about tariffs, and a lot of people are asking me if they could have exceptions. And once you do that for one, you have to do that for all. So, I mean, generally, I did something interestingly during 2 weeks ago. I gave the American car companies a break because it would have been unfair if I didn't. And everybody said, oh, he changed his mind on tariffs. I didn't change my mind. I helped our, sort of big three, big four. I helped some of the American companies. And instead of taking it properly, they said, oh, he changed it. I don't change, but the word flexibility is an important word. Sometimes there's flexibility, so there'll be flexibility, but basically it's reciprocal. So that if China's charging us 50% or 30% or 20%, and I don't mean China, I mean anybody, any country, Canada. Nobody knows that Canada's charging our dairy farmers. They have 270% tariffs. Nobody knows that. Nobody knows that. They have up to 400%.
Yeah, a lot of people know that actually. But there's no market for Canadian cheese in the United States. They make a lot of it. And so it's reciprocal. And American cheese doesn't get into Canada either. So the dairy argument is really a red herring. And anybody who knows how hard the dairy industry lobbies, no, it's one of the most powerful lobby groups in Canada. And that's why they have such so-called protection.
They have a couple of tariffs at 400%. Nobody knows that. Nobody talks about that. And remember, with Canada, we don't need their cars. We don't need their lumber. We don't need their energy. We don't need anything from Canada. and yet it costs us $200 billion a year in subsidy to keep Canada afloat.
It keeps repeating
So
that.
when I say they should be a state, I mean that. I really mean that, because we can't be expected to carry a country that is right next to us on our border. It would be a great state. It would be a cherished state. The taxes for Canadian citizens would go down in less than half.
And of course, it's not 200 billion, it's 60 billion. And it's all oil and gas, because the Americans need our oil and gas, because their refineries are built for the Canadian crude, which is sulfuric. They're not built for the American crude. So this has been a scam that's going on for decades. America gets cheap oil and gas from Canada. They refine it and sell it back to us. So that's what Trump isn't getting here. And like I say, nobody is more fond of Donald Trump's policies, with the exception of this one. And you've got, I will not bend over for any politician, because I think he or she is always right, because they never are. And he's dead wrong about this one.
They don't spend money on military because they think we're going to protect them. There are many things that they do, like icebreakers. They want us to provide icebreakers for them. Oh, that's wonderful. So the Canada, they're very tough traders too. I want to just tell you, all the people, they're tough traders. They trade very tough. And, you know, the expression I use is, some people don't have the cards. I used that expression about a week and a half ago, right? Somebody was negotiating who didn't have the cards, who's now, I think, saying that he wants to do it, and I think we're going to have a big deal on that very special something. We got to make a deal on that. But Canada has been a very nasty negotiator against the United States, took advantage of the United States for a long time. But nobody knows that they were getting 270% tariffs on dairy products.
I don't think I've heard you say this in all of the talk about Canada becoming the 51st state. Are you concerned that if they became the 51st state, they would be a very, very blue state? Very, very big and very, very blue.
No, there might be, but it would, you know, you have that artificial line that goes, that straight artificial, that looked like it was drawn by...
Not answering the question
ruler.
at all.
Somebody with a, I don't mean a ruler like a king, I mean like a ruler, this way. And it's just an artificial line that was drawn in the sand or in the ice. And you know, can I tell Peter, just... You add that to this country, what a beautiful landmass, the most beautiful landmass anywhere in the world. And it was just cut off for whatever reason. It would be great. Now, is it liberal? Maybe, but you know, a conservative until I got involved, because I don't care who wins up there. I frankly probably would do better with the liberal than the conservative, if you want to know the truth. But
why?
Just a little while ago, before I got involved and totally changed the election, which I don't care about, probably it's to our advantage actually, but the conservative was leading against, I call him Governor Trudeau, the conservative was leading by 35 points. So, you know, so I don't know about that. I think Canada is a place like a lot of other places. If you have a good candidate, the candidate's going to win.
So why does anybody think Mark Carney is going to be an effective negotiator against Donald Trump? Why would Donald Trump even want Mark Carney? I don't know what he's playing here. I don't know what the game really is. However, I do know this about Donald Trump. He tends to reflect the views of the last person he talked to. And he can change his whole opinion on something on a dime. And I predict this is what's going to happen here. He's going to see how stupid this talk is, that you can't support Mark Carney in his net zero policies because they're going to have an effect on the United States, a negative effect on the United States. And I don't think Donald Trump wants that. What kind of a man is Mark Carney? This is not great video. But thanks to Real News, who posted this on X, we can see that Mark Carney goes over to these workers and they don't even want to shake his hand. They don't even want to look at him.
Well, hello everyone.
The one guy looks down like,
welcome.
I don't even want to be here.
And those who are visiting us, welcome to Edmonton, Alberta's capital city, and the city of festivals. And so, good afternoon. And today is an exciting day.
It's an exciting day. See how excited those guys were? They didn't even want to meet Mark Carney. Now that's the reality. Don't give me these trumped up polls. Maybe that's the wrong to use. Don't give me these polls that have Mark Carney being so popular among Canadians. I don't believe it. Because he is such an elitist, such a globalist, so detached from the average Canadian, so unconcerned about the average Canadian. I don't buy this at all. This is why we have to keep pushing back on the propaganda. When this election is called, it's going to be an electoral war. And Mark Carney thinks it's going to be another election walk, like his election victory in the Liberal leadership campaign was a walk. He didn't even try. Same speech every night, same platitudes, same nonsense. And I want you to see who's supporting Mark Carney, because Doug Ford claims he only met Pierre Poilievre yesterday. Pierre Poilievre has been the leader of the official opposition for 3 years. And Doug Ford is pretending he only met him yesterday. And how did he say? He didn't ask for my support. I'm going to support anybody who is going to be good for Ontario. And based on what I saw here, I think he's going to support Mark Carney.
You can do segue the comments. If I may, actually, sorry, I've made a see. This is the first mistake. It's the only mistake I'm going to make, because the president of the Council of the Federation should speak. So I pass to you.
Well, first of all, thank you, Prime Minister. Congratulations on becoming Prime Minister of Canada. We have an incredible First Minister's table. I want to welcome you. We have incredible First Ministers right around this great country, and the message is let's stay united as we move forward. There's a lot of large infrastructure projects that we'd like to discuss, no matter if it's pipelines, as Premier Smith is always mentioning, which I agree, going east, going west, going north, going south, building large infrastructure projects like rail and ports as well, along with critical minerals, the Ring of Fire. But these are all the areas that we'd love to discuss and move forward. But again, welcome everyone, and isn't this great? We're in the War Museum. So economic war we're facing right now as a country.
Isn't this great? I'm in Mark Carney's pocket. Doug Ford, the phony conservative, just won another election, a completely unnecessary election. He called it early because he thought Pierre Poilievre was going to win the federal election. And historically, traditionally, Ontario votes for a different political party federally than they do provincially. So he was concerned. Conservative Prime Minister, maybe I'm going to lose the next election. And that's what it was all about. Completely self-interest. Now, like what Pierre Poilievre says here, it's a bizarre setup where they've got this, I think she looks like maybe a university student. And it's kind of awkward. And it's really phony. But I like what Poilievre says, because he needs to get down to basics on his policies. Stop just using 4 slogans. He needs to get concrete. And he needs to use the policies to inspire conservative voters. He is going to need massive voter participation to win this election. He is going up against the Canadian establishment. Let's listen to this.
Actually, the press did touch on it. So, sorry. Mr. Poilievre, As you know, the former CEO of the Canada Pension Plan, Mark Wiseman, is the co-founder of the Century Initiative, a lobbying group that wants to double Canada's population to 100 million through immigration, driving wages down and housing up, making it near impossible to start a family. I'm a young Canadian, I love to do that. I'm concerned that affordability means longer mortgages and debt instead of cheaper houses. So Pierre, will you commit to stopping this crazy social experiment that hurts everybody involved, including the immigrants, lowering the price of homes, putting us first?
The answer is yes, absolutely. I will stop the insanity. I'm against the Century Initiative. I voted against the Century Initiative in the House of Commons when it came up. It's a radical, crazy idea that's meant for multinational corporate elites to bring in people from poor countries in large numbers to take away Canadian jobs, drive wages down, and profits up. And I love the immigrant people. I want more. I want people to come here in numbers that can actually be housed, employed, and cared for, like we used to have. We used to have a great system, and you know, people from around the world came here with nothing but a dream and a suitcase, and it worked. But in the last 10 years of the Liberals, it's gotten totally out of control. If they're growing the population by 1.2 million people a year. We're only building 200,000 homes. So our population is growing 3 times faster than our housing stock. No wonder we can't get people can't actually get a place to live. So I'm going to slow immigration down, and I have a very simple mathematical formula. The numbers we let in this year will have to be lower than the number of homes we built in the previous year. So we're always going to be adding homes faster than we add people. And that will allow us to bring down the housing shortage and get rid of it, the housing shortage altogether, so that young people can afford a place. The other part of that, by the way, we've got to cut the taxes. I'm going to take the GST off new homes. We're going to incentivize the municipalities to speed up permits, free up land, and cut development charges so that you guys here at LiUNA can help build more homes. You'll be laying the foundation on those homes, but you'll also be able to afford to live in them.
Thank you.
You agree with that?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, that was a Conservative Party video, but I think what he's saying is right. Is he against mass immigration, though? Mass migration? There's a lot of things he voted for in the House of Commons that I couldn't support. And I'll say that. Pierre Poilievre's not perfect. And I would probably rather see Maxime Bernier win. However, Maxime Bernier is not going to win the next election unless there's a huge change in the voting intentions in this country. But I generally agree more when I talk to Maxime Bernier, who I consider a friend. However, we have to do everything possible to ensure that Mark Carney, who is a clear and present danger to the Canadian economy and to the Canadian way of life, whatever is left of it, that he does not become an elected prime minister. That's extremely important. Maxime Bernier told me he expects Pierre Poilievre to win the next election. He just hopes he doesn't win a massive majority, so he feels he can do whatever he wants. And that's probably going to be the case. I don't think he's going to win the biggest majority in history like he was 3 months ago. But I think it's still possible he could win to keep Mark Carney out. And believe me, that has got to be our goal right now. We have got to fight this Mark Carney onslaught, because the Liberals will do anything to stay in power. They think it's their right. They think they're entitled to stay in power. This has always been the party. No matter where they go, how low they go in the polls, they keep popping back up and thinking they're going to win again. Well, we'll see. Election call is expected tomorrow. I'll be back to talk about that. Want to do a lot more interviews in the next week or so. And I want to stay on top of this election. There's always going to be more news to report every day, and we're never going to be so busy. Thank you for watching today. And let's continue to resolve to resist tyranny in this country. Continue to resolve to resist net zero policies. Continue to resolve to resist environmental extremism. And I'll be back again tomorrow with all the news you need to know. Thank you for watching today.